This morning, we're going to talk about Black Lives Matter and white privilege. And I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter was founded in 2013 by 3 African American women, Alicia Garza, Patrice Cullors, and Opal Tometi, in response to the acquittal of George Zimmerman in the Trayvon Martin case. Garza is Special Projects Director for the National Domestic Workers Alliance. Cullors is founder of the prison activism organization Dignity and Power Now. Opal Tometi is Executive Director of the Black Alliance for Just Immigration. The movement, which is decentralized and has no hierarchy, describes itself as an ideological and political intervention in a world where Black lives are systematically and intentionally targeted for demise. It is an affirmation of Black folks' contribution to this society, our humanity, and our resilience in the face of deadly oppression. Its guiding principles are diversity, globalism, restorative justice, collective value, and loving engagement. It is intergenerational, queer-affirming, and transgender-affirming. It is unapologetically Black and committed to Black women, Black families, and Black villages. It seeks to build connections between Black people and our allies to fight anti-racism, anti-Black racism, to spark dialogue among Black people, and to facilitate the types of connections necessary to encourage social action and engagement. Those are their words. While its purpose is sometimes unclear and its tactics occasionally questionable, there's no denying that Black Lives Matter has become a rallying cry for many and a common and prominent presence in our society. There are Black Lives Matter protests and events all over the country and indeed the world every day. It demands recognition by public officials and political candidates. Individuals and organizations of every race and ethnicity are involved, not just Black people. Critics of Black Lives Matter often reply that all lives matter, which, while technically true, misses the point according to movement organizers. As co-founder Garza explained to a white reporter, Black Lives Matter doesn't mean your life isn't important. It means that Black lives, which are seen as without value within white supremacy, are important to your liberation. When Black people get free, everyone gets free. When we deploy All Lives Matters as if to correct an intervention specifically created to address anti-Blackness, we lose the ways in which the state apparatus has built a program of genocide and repression mostly on the backs of Black people, beginning with the theft of millions of people for free labor, and then adapted it to control, murder, and profit off of other communities of color and immigrant communities. When you drop Black from the equation of whose lives matter, and then fail to acknowledge it came from somewhere, you further a legacy of erasing Black lives and Black contributions from our movement legacy, end quote. So that's what it is. Now, what has been the UU response to the Black Lives Matter movement? This summer, General Assembly passed an action of immediate witness calling on member congregations to do 3 things. 1, engage in intentional learning spaces to organize for racial justice with recognition of the interconnected nature of racism coupled with systems of oppression that impact people based on class, gender identity, sexual orientation, ability, and language. 2, work toward police reform and prison abolition, which seeks to replace the current prison system with a system that is more just and equitable. 3, recognize that the fight for civil rights is as real today as it was decades ago, and to take initiatives in collaboration with local and national organizations in fighting for racial justice against the harsh racist practices to which many Black people are exposed. So many congregations have embraced the Black Lives Matter movement. They've posted and reposted signs. They're holding vigils and participating in protests. They're hosting and attending conferences, preaching sermons, and hosting workshops. Kenny Wiley, UU World Senior Editor and Director of Faith Formation at Prairie UU Church in Parker, Colorado, encourages UUs to do 5 things. 1, learn. Get educated about the realities of racial inequality and injustice as it exists today in your own communities. 2, connect. Embrace the Black Lives Matter movement as it exists today. Listen to young Black leaders locally and nationally. 3, support the movement with food, water, physical space for meetings, and help with event setup and takedown. 4, engage. Make it known that you're a part of the movement. And 5, stay woke. Refuse to succumb to the temptation to ignore the racial realities of this country. I'll tell you, it's not easy sometimes. I know that. Many congregations are struggling with their participation in the Black Lives Matter movement. In some congregations, there is disagreement as to what their involvement should be, with many members leaning toward an all lives matter stance. Congregations that do take a stand often find themselves the target of those who oppose the movement. There have been many stories in the news about banners stolen and vandalized at various UU churches, and of public dissent and horrible conversations that are happening that are not healthy. In a lot of these cases, the churches just purchase new signs and hang them up again, but sadly, some give up. And it's not only happening in congregations. UU seminaries and seminarians are particularly active in the Black Lives Matter movement. There are many ardent Black Lives Matter supporters at my school, Meadville Lombard. And then there's social media. There are several online communities and Facebook groups such as Are You Awake?, Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism, and UU Allies for Racial Equity, who are committed to advancing this important cause. Next week, as a congregation, you will have a conversation about Black Lives Matter and white privilege. You will discuss whether you, as individuals and congregation, want to be part of that movement, and if so, how? I won't be part of that discussion, but I have every confidence that it will be a productive, engaging, and sincere conversation around a challenging and important topic. My role is to give you some background information on the movement, what it is, and how some UUs have responded, and to share with you my experiences. It's all part of our spiritual journey. So last month, CJ approached me after service and told me that you guys were planning to have a Black Lives Matter conversation. She asked me if I'd preach on the topic. And I said, sure. But much later, I thought, oh my, what have I gotten myself into? I've lived in this body on this earth for more than 50 years. Race has been an inescapable part of my existence. I've been the victim of racism, both subtle and overt, on an almost daily basis. But is it something I want to preach about? I started seminary on June 1st and traveled to Chicago for my first intensive period in July. I immediately sensed something was different, but I couldn't put my finger on it. That feeling became even more pressing when I went back to Chicago in August for fall convocation. So much so that I pulled the director of admissions aside for a private conversation. I told her that I was having doubts about whether I belonged at Meadville Lombard and whether I should be a minister. Sensing her alarm, I took a deep breath and finally put words to the feeling of distress that I'd been suffering. In my whole life, I couldn't think of another time when I'd been as keenly aware of my blackness as I was feeling at that time. We left the campus and had a long talk over lunch. She didn't try to talk me out of what I was feeling. She just listened. I've talked about this with a few of my classmates, both white and black. Some truly understood. Some said they understood, but obviously didn't. Some tried to understand, but just couldn't grasp what I was saying. In the end, I just put it away in my heart and kept going. So what was this feeling about? What was going on? When I arrived at school, I was invited to participate in a number of Black Lives Matters activities. Because Meadville Lombard is a low residency school, we use Facebook for much of our interaction. I was urged to follow a couple of the anti-racism Facebook groups to which many of the students belong, and I listed some of those at the beginning of the service. I joined, but found the well-intentioned but constant conversation about race, and particularly white privilege, overwhelming. On top of what I had to deal with every day, it was too much. And now I'd agreed to do a sermon about it. What would I say? When I would tell someone that I was going to preach about Black Lives Matter, the response was invariably, let them have it, or give it to them good, or something to that effect. To be absolutely honest, that bothered me a lot. Racism is real. It's not a game. And like all of you, I wish it didn't exist. But me standing up here today, lecturing you as a group about your white privilege isn't going to get us anywhere. Maybe we can or should have a talk about it later, after you've had your own conversation next week. But not today. Besides, I don't even know some of you. I don't know enough about you to know whether you need to be educated about race. Those of you I've gotten to know so far are absolutely lovely people. You've given me no reason to question your sincerity. You've welcomed me into this home with open arms. I certainly can't stand up here and castigate you for behavior that I haven't witnessed. That's not helpful to anybody. So I agonized over this sermon for several days. I didn't even finish it until last night and was still making changes this morning. I even borrowed a pen from the table and made another change at about 10:10 this morning. I wasn't sure what I wanted to say. In fact, I chose Spirit of Life as the prelude this morning to give me strength to do this. That was for me, not for you. Although I think you enjoyed it too. I have so many feelings about this topic that I haven't even sorted out for myself yet. Besides, what gives my point of view any more weight? Surely not just because I'm black. Then the lawyer in me took over. I can talk about race, and I will talk about it honestly. But first, I need to issue a disclaimer. The opinions expressed in today's sermon represent the personal views and opinions of the speaker and are not intended to represent those of all black people. I'm going to tell you how it feels for me to be a black UU. I'm focusing on my experience as a UU because sometimes we think our own house is in order and the problem is out there in the world. That's not always true. So I hope my remarks give you some insight that you can take with you into next week's conversation about Black Lives Matter. I hope they help you in your own personal efforts against racism and oppression in our society at large. All I ask is that you listen with an open mind and an open heart. So how does it feel to be a black UU? Most of the time, it feels great. But sometimes it feels lonely. I looked for statistics on how many black Unitarian Universalists there are in the United States today, and I couldn't find it. The closest I could get was superimposing a Pew Trust study upon the UUA's own membership statistics. And forgive me for indulging my geekiness. I used to be a tax lawyer, so the number thing kind of is good to me. The UUA reported 158,186 members in 1,047 congregations. Pew says that in 2014, 5% of those who attended churches in UU and other liberal religions were black. So 5% of that 158,000 is about 7,900. Spread out over a little more than 1,000 congregations, that's about 7 per church. And we know in reality that that number is skewed. Some congregations are way more diverse than others. So it's lonely being the only one at events. Or as one of my classmates put it, being the only chocolate chip in the cookie. It's not like I want to run off and have secret blacks-only meetings. It's just that sometimes it's nice to go into a place and see other people who look like you. Ladies, have you ever walked into a room full of men? Any event where you expected there was going to be a mixed crowd and you're the only woman in the room? You noticed it, didn't you? Or guys, what about you? You walked into a room expecting a mixed crowd and you're the only man there. I bet you noticed that too. It isn't that you don't want to be around the men or women, whichever it is. It's just that you notice the absence of the opposite sex. So I feel that way a lot of the time as a black UU. At First Unitarian, my home congregation, we might have 100 to 150 people in attendance, but maybe only 3 or 4 black people. And 2 of them are homeless people from the area who tend to come into the church for the warmth and coffee and hospitality hour. On many Sundays, I was the only black person in the sanctuary. This feeling is even more intense when I travel. As part of a school project, I visited a large UU congregation in a suburb. There were over 100 people in attendance for a summer service. I was the only black person there. I can't tell you how many double takes I saw as people were surprised or stunned or whatever to see a black person. To make matters worse, after the service at coffee hour, I was given the special mug for visitors. So it stood out and labeled me even more. Don't get me wrong, nobody was rude. They were all very, very nice, but I felt like an animal in the zoo, like a tiger cub, a novelty, albeit a cute one, that everyone wanted to see. It felt so incredibly lonely. I couldn't wait to complete the observation required for my school assignment and get out of there. And just as an aside, I learned an important lesson that I'll take with me into my ministry. Congregations should not give the visitor the special cup. Give the special cup to the membership chair. And then tell visitors, look for the person with the green hat. That's what we were at First U. The person with the green hat can help you. It shifts the onus. So how does it feel to be a black UU? Again, most of the time it feels great, but sometimes I feel unimportant. This is the flip side of feeling lonely. Often in our eagerness to be inclusive, we say we don't see color. We say we're all the same on the inside. We're not all the same anywhere, inside or out. I want you to see my blackness. I just don't want that to be all you see. Each of us is a unique combination of gifts and traits given to us by our parents and by the universe. Your eye color, my stubby fingers, color of your hair, These are all pieces of who you are. My blackness is part of who I am, just like my hazel eyes. Don't treat me any differently because of it, but don't ignore it either. It hurts when you tell me to my face, that you are colorblind. It tells me that you don't view me as a whole person. When you refuse to see all of me, you see none of me. I feel dismissed and unimportant, as if I don't matter to you as a unique person. How else does it feel to be a black UU? Sometimes I feel wary. Unitarian and Universalist and Unitarian Universalist attention to anti-racism honestly has waxed and waned over the years. Many of the earliest American Unitarians were staunch and tireless activists against slavery. But by the 1900s, the AUA, the forerunner to the UUA, and its president, Dr. Samuel Eliot, were hard at work to keep Ethelred Brown, a black man, from becoming a Unitarian minister. Dr. Eliot, for all his administrative brilliance and everything he did to strengthen the denomination, held some seriously troubling attitudes about blacks. Quote, "As to the darkies, I can't get enough of them." And he called them merry, shiftless rascals. He didn't believe blacks could be ministers in UU churches. Fortunately, the tide turned again, and whites became involved in the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s. But that was followed by the empowerment controversy in the late 60s and the departure of many people of color from our churches. Now we're back up again with Black Lives Matter. See what I mean? I'm cautious and I'm wary. It's probably a very dangerous thing that I'm taking 2 UU history courses right now because I'm seeing this stuff in painstaking detail. I'm afraid that this is only a trend and that it won't last. I know we won't go back to the attitudes like Eliot, but I'm afraid that we'll lose our interest again in racial equity. I don't want to jump on this bandwagon only to have my heart broken. So how does it feel to be a black UU? Most of the time it feels great, but sometimes I feel frustrated. There's more to the race problem in this country than police violence, which sadly is what some people think is the only issue. It's about more than hands up, don't shoot. This is about generational poverty, inferior schools, financial illiteracy, unemployment, underemployment, and lack of opportunity. What are we doing about that? This frustration isn't particular to me as a UU. This bothers me as a black person, period. Systemic racism runs deep in our society. Sometimes it's very subtle and nuanced. I think of those little microaggressions that happen every single day. Yesterday, a classmate of mine, a young black man, told me he wears glasses to soften his face so he won't look scary to white people. He dresses every day in a dress shirt so that he won't look threatening. I wondered why he was the only student at convocation in August wearing a 3-piece suit every day. Now I know. That breaks my heart. My mother told me early on that I was going to have to be twice as good as my white counterparts to get half as far. She never went to college and didn't work in business, so I didn't know whether to believe it, even though she had a genius-level IQ. But she was right. Even with my bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and a law degree, I'm still at a disadvantage when it comes to competing for a job against a white man with just a bachelor's degree. And even when we get the job, we're not always safe. I resigned a high-paying legal position because the corporate treasurer made a racial joke during our executive holiday lunch. The apology I received actually included the words, "But Connie, we don't think about you that way." I thought, so I'm one of the good ones, I guess? I resigned with no other job to go to. As UUs, we're just beginning to scratch the surface of these kinds of issues. How does it feel to be a black UU? Most of the time, it's great, but sometimes I feel tired. I met a young woman online in August. We chatted when I responded to something she'd posted on one of the racial justice Facebook pages. I don't even remember what her post was. I wasn't trying to strike up a serious racial conversation, but that's what happened. And it was okay the first, second, and third times. The trouble was that was all she ever wanted to talk to me about. I was getting instant messages every day about white people's reaction to Black Lives Matter. And what's the matter with us? Why do we behave this way? We're looking to you black people to teach us. I've had classmates preface their comments to me by apologizing for their white privilege. It's tiring. I get that this is new for some of them and they want to talk about it all the time. But I can't do it. I get tired of every conversation having to reference Black Lives Matter or white privilege. Do white students apologize for white privilege all the time when they speak to one another? Talk to me the same way you'd talk to anyone else. Talk to me about tennis. I love tennis. Ask me about my work. Let's talk about dogs. Did you know that I volunteer for the Delaware SPCA 8 hours a week? It's okay to talk to me about something besides race. I understand that white people have their own issues and feelings about race that they need to sort out. I want them to feel safe in coming to me to talk about anything. I will always be there, and I will never turn you away because that's who I am. I just ask that you be aware that sometimes, as a black UU, I get tired. So I've shared a lot with you today. Some of it might have been hard for you to hear, might have made you uncomfortable. But I think it's important that you hear it. I want you to hear one more thing. I am a Unitarian Universalist to my core. I am proud to be a UU and can't imagine being anything but a UU. When it comes to racial matters, we have to admit that our history is not perfect. Our present is not perfect. And we probably won't be perfect in the future. But we'll keep trying. How does it feel to be a black UU in this age of Black Lives Matter? Sometimes lonely, sometimes unimportant, sometimes wary, frustrated, and just plain tired all at the same time. But I also feel encouraged because at least we're trying. We're taking baby steps. So I take a deep breath and I keep on going. This is my chosen faith, and I am committed to pursuing my calling as a UU minister. So why don't we all take a deep breath together? We'll keep talking, and we'll keep working together in the hope that maybe someday racism will no longer be an issue. We won't need to be reminded that Black Lives Matter because we'll already know in our souls that they do.